This is the relative whose very presence increases the likelihood of your attending events. Is Charlie going to be there? Is a question my wife is tired of hearing me ask. Why do I like Charlie so much? He tells the best stories. He's 30 years old, from low country South Carolina, and quintessentially Southern. He's also a firefighter at 2 different stations, which gives him plenty of fodder for what I guess you would call yarns. So when I find him at family events, he is quick to tell me things like, I got called out to a scene down a dark highway one night. Some guy had hit a deer. Just wrecked his car. Deer is laying spread out on the side of the road. All of a sudden, a pickup truck pulls up alongside me and rolls the window down. Guy leans out and says, You gonna keep that deer? At this point, having very little experience with carcass negotiations, I am fascinated. What did you do? I asked Charlie. I helped him load the deer into the back of his truck and he drove off. If you eat Thanksgiving with Charlie, you are guaranteed at least 7 stories exactly like this. That's what I've come to know and love about Charlie. But one Christmas, he caught me off guard. My wife's extended family had planned a big ski trip to Crested Butte. A friend had donated a massive 10,000 square foot house for all of us to stay in for the week. But ski ticket prices and flights to Colorado were still expensive. I asked Charlie if he and his wife were going to be able to make it. Well, I'm working double shifts and overtime at both stations. It's not easy because Hillary wants me home more. But every time I leave the house, I ask her, Do you really want to go to Colorado? If she says yes, then I say, I'll see you tomorrow. And then I go to work. Hustle is really that simple. We often try to make it complicated. We say things like, I don't even know where to start, or I just don't have the time, or I'm afraid to do it the wrong way, when it comes to hard work and putting in effort. But our desire to complicate it is all too often just a cover for laziness or fear. Hustle is not hard. If you write your blog every day, at the end of the year, you will have more readers than when you started. If you get up early and work on your dream 2 hours more than somebody else, your dream will progress faster. If you want to go to Colorado, you might have to work double shifts. Sometimes I am terrified of the work involved, of sitting down and knowing that tens of thousands of my words won't actually ever go into a book. Sometimes I am frustrated by all the practice writing that must be invested before you get to the words you're really looking for. Sometimes I am just flat out lazy. I told my wife while I was writing this book, I hate dragging boxes of stuffed Christian-like books on the plane with me when I go speak. She laughed and said, Hustle isn't just doing the things you love all the time. Hustle is doing the things you don't enjoy sometimes to earn the right to do the things you love. She was right, and so is Charlie's simple logic. Do I want to be an author? Then I have to write books. Do I want to be an author? Then I have to carry boxes of books on airplanes. The same equation is going to impact your ability to meet your dream too. Write down that equation for yourself, or throw it in your iPhone, or whatever sort of scent-based hologram technology you're using in the year 2060, should you be reading this book that far in the future. Do I want blank? Then I have to blank. Dreams start in the morning. The lady who cuts my hair at Sport Clips is one of the hardest working people I know. She hustles like few people on the planet. In addition to cutting hair all day, she also works the night shift at UPS. Not seasonally. She's not picking up Christmas work to make some extra money for the holidays. She loads trucks from 3 to 8 a.m. and then works at Sport Clips from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. She is actively working both jobs with everything she's got. I'm not completely sure she's not a vampire because I can't understand when she is sleeping. But if I told her that she needed to get up earlier to work on a dream, she would cut me with the scissors. So if your life situation makes it impossible, I mean stab you in the neck if you even suggest I get up any earlier, John Acuff impossible, then don't get up any earlier. Keep doing what you're doing the way you're doing it and carve out time in another way that fits your life. I completely understand that as a dad and a husband, I might have different family commitments than you do. But I still think when it's possible, and it's possible more often than most people think, before your day job gets started in the morning is still the best time to hustle on your dream job. Why? The excuses haven't really woken up yet. They're still snoring. You can beat your fears to task and get an hour or two of dream time before your obstacles even know what happened. If you wait until night to work on your dream, you will often spend the whole day gathering up material for excuses on why you shouldn't do what it is you feel called to do. I need to clean up. I have to return a few phone calls. I just need to unwind. Your day rolls toward night like an excuse snowball barreling down a hill, packing on more excuses with every rotation. Do you know when you have a lot fewer excuses to claw your way through? In the morning. Nobody wakes up and wants to balance their checkbook. Few can return phone calls at 5 a.m. There's nothing good on TV, and watching shows you've TiVoed before the crack of dawn feels a little weird. The only excuse you have to deal with is being tired. But that's one you can work through over time. Or forget working through it over time. Go to bed earlier. See that? I just eliminated the excuse. You're welcome. If it's not an excuse that keeps you from working on your dream in the evening, it'll be another competitive option that distracts you. The guy you've been dying to go out with calls you unexpectedly and asks you to dinner. A friend you haven't seen for weeks pops in. You have to work late because a project blew up at the office. Again, do you know when those things are not happening? In the morning. If a guy asks you to breakfast at 5 a.m., don't date him. That is a stupid time for a date, even if it involves a hot air balloon like the one that emergency landed in my driveway one morning. That girl didn't look so happy. And someone who pops in at 5 a.m. isn't popping in. They are breaking in. Last but not least, a project you are working on at your job is very unlikely to need you at 5 a.m. Bosses come in all the time at 5 p.m. for things they need done right away. But I've never had a boss knock on my bedroom door before the sun comes up and say, "Hey, Cuff, I need you to work on this. It's critical. So critical, I'm standing in your bedroom at 5 a.m. That just doesn't happen often. For me, excuses aren't the only thing I have less of in the morning. My doubt tends to sleep in. My self-esteem gets up before the sun. I don't know if the "who are you to do that" beast sleeps late too, but I certainly feel capable of more in the morning. In addition to my blog, I also wrote the book Stuff Christians Like every morning before work because I felt as though my reserve of energy, creativity, and curiosity got chipped away all day. When you're falling in like with a job you don't love, you will work hard at your company. You will often be empty by the time you get home from work, with nothing left for your dream. The unexpected benefit is that if you work on your dream in the morning, it gives you a natural boost that can last the entire day. There's a great sense of joy that comes from accomplishing something that moves you closer to your dream job. There's a sense that regardless of what the day brings, you started with the work you love. You started by doing what matters to you most. That sense of joy and contentment can make the rest of your day even better. When I was full after a morning of writing my own stuff, I was much less likely to demand that Autotrader.com fulfill that role. By hustling in the morning for 30 minutes to an hour and a half, I could do my day job with a much better perspective. Even if you're a night owl. I'm not sure the same can be said of working on your dreams strictly at night. Sleeping tends to reset that good feeling. You might fall asleep with a sense of accomplishment, but it usually won't carry into the next day or fuel you as you work your day job. In fact, you'll likely fall prey to what we like to call short-timer's disease. You might stay focused on your day job tasks until lunch, but once that clock strikes 1, you'll be counting down the minutes to the time you can get back to your dream job. The like versus love list. None of my friends will admit to watching an entire episode of Jersey Shore. If you're reading this from the future, and this intimate look at life in New Jersey is off the air, imagine the book Lord of the Flies, powered by Red Bull and Axe body spray. If you ask my friends if they have seen the show, they will respond, "I caught a little while flipping channels." Somewhere, millions of people are watching whole episodes, but apparently, I don't know any of those people. Or, all my friends are liars. It's one of those two. The grandfather of Jersey Shore was a show called The Real World. It was a similar concept. Throw attractive, opinionated people in a house they couldn't normally afford, add liquor, shake. To be honest, I used to watch not only whole episodes of that show, I'd watch marathons. I'd sit down and not blink for hours without realizing it. Time, space, common sense, all forms of normal life were put on hold when I'd watch The Real World. But when I got married, that changed. It changed because you start to realize the silliness of giving a show like that 4 hours of your life, especially when you say it out loud. Oh, you wanted to go out to that cafe for brunch with some friends? That's one thing we could do. Or we could watch 240 straight minutes of MTV's The Real World. That kind of thing happens a lot when you get married. It's not your time anymore. It's our time. A layer of selfishness gets worn away, which might feel more like torn away as you start sharing your time with someone other than yourself. Then you have kids, and your time gets even smaller. You go from your time to our time to their time. An additional layer of selfishness gets stripped, and you find yourself with a very different clock than you had when you were young and single and watching someone intoxicated debate the merits of jumping off a roof into a pool on the Real World Cancun. The misconception is that you have less time to do the things you love when you get really busy. And it's a misconception that will carry over into your pursuit of trying to balance a full-time dream and a full-time job. The reality is that when you get busy doing the things that matter to you, you actually have more time to do the things you love and less time to do the things you like. Working on your dream job and your day job forces you to decide which things are a priority to you. It forces you to make a like versus love list. Because you won't have as much free time for the things you like. Just like I couldn't spend 4 hours watching the Real World marathons once I got married and had kids. I liked doing that, but I didn't love doing that. If I had a free hour, I wanted to invest it wisely. I wanted to spend it jogging or writing or doing something that mattered to me. My hours cost me too much to spend them on the real world. If my wife and kids were out of town, I planned my time accordingly so that I could get some freelance work done and hustle on the stuff Christians like book. I gave up some freedom for doing things I liked, but what I gained was a tremendous amount of love. Though on the surface I was busy, I was actually spending a ton of time on things I loved. More so than I ever did when I was single and not making decisions based on my list. That's one of the simple rules of hustle. Do more of the things you love and less of the things you like. Make your hustle matter. That's not to demonize TV or any other activity people might classify as downtime. But be deliberate about what is really a like and what is really a love. And then hustle to keep love a bigger part of your day than like. The unfortunate relationship between quantity and quality. I've become the kind of author I used to hate. I'm not talking about the guy with elbow patches on his corduroy jacket and a pipe in his mouth and a wry barb about the Spanish-American War. I've got no problem with that guy. In the right setting, I find him delightful. The person I really used to dislike is the author who told me writing was hard work and took time. I wanted writing a book to be easy and simple and above all, fast. So when I'd read books on writing and they'd say, write 500 words every day for a year, or write and rewrite some more, I'd feel like my dream had done the old bait and switch on me. I thought chasing my dream would be easy. If you love something and feel passionate about it, shouldn't it on some level always come naturally? When I think of the stereotype of people who follow their dream, I think of someone glistening with syrupy happiness, not sweat. They laugh the day away and have tickle fights and long conversations with good friends under shade trees. That was my impression of what it means to follow your dream. It might have been hard work, but it was work you loved, so you didn't notice it was difficult or frustrating at times. It didn't feel like work at all. It flowed out of you with very little effort. I was wrong. Chasing your dream is not like that. Fulfilling your dream is not like that. Closing the gap between a day job and a dream job is not really like that. So I became the author I used to hate. When people ask me, how do you get a book published? Which is just a specific way to ask, how do you make your dream happen? They want the same answer I used to want. It's actually pretty easy. You just write a draft of a book, usually over a long weekend in a cabin somewhere with a vista. Gotta have a vista. Then, after you write it, you give it to a publisher. They fall in love usually faster than it took you to write it. Then, you go on a book tour that is highly attended and not at all just you sitting by an empty table watching people pick up your life's work, flip through it, shrug in disappointment, and walk away. You then collect royalties, debate whether to let Guy Ritchie turn it into a movie, and pick out where you want to live now. That's probably the hardest part of the whole book writing experience. Deciding what to do with your money. Are you a beachfront cottage or mountain chalet person? That's the real dilemma of book writing. Picking your second home. Huge hassle. That's the answer I used to want before I became a well-traveled, seasoned author of a grand total of 3 books. But you only have to publish 1 book and pursue your dream a little to learn a lesson about the unfortunate relationship between quantity and quality. It's a lesson that applies to every form of dream chasing. Quantity leads to quality. The more you practice your dream, the better you get at your dream. In order to get a 50,000 word book published, I had to write 500,000 words on my blog. I had to essentially give away 500,000 words before I could build the momentum and ability to actually write the book. Since it came out, I've added another 500,000. So in 3 years, I've written 1 million words to publish 50,000. And as I've mentioned, Stuff Christians Like wasn't the first blog I had. I had another one called Prodigal John for about a year before I even started SCL. Barely anyone read that one. But that was a testing ground for me. That gave me the chance to practice my dream. Even that phrase looks weird, doesn't it? Practice my dream. Nobody says that. Practice is for sports or GRE tests or things that are difficult. It's not a word we often associate with a dream. But I think it's a critical one if you really want to turn a day job into a dream job. There is much practice involved. There are Nebraska years and grinding it out and sweat and early mornings. And you have to commit to put quantity before quality. You can't reverse those. If you try, analysis paralysis will cripple you. The false promise of perfection will keep you from pursuing your dream. Putting quantity first gives you the freedom to be patient with yourself. This is the quantity portion of my dream. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. These aren't mistakes I'm making. These are quantity payments. I'll get to quality, but first, I have to pay the cost of quantity. I wish this wasn't true, for both our sakes. But if it were easy to execute a dream, everyone would do it, and your dream wouldn't be so spectacular. The Fountain of Free. There have been hundreds of articles and at least a dozen books written about the word free in the last 10 years. With the growth of the internet and the abundance of free content, resources, and wares, the opinion on whether or not you should give your dream away can be confusing. Some camps insist the best way to create fans is to give away whatever it is you're doing for a period of time with the hope that after that time, you can charge a freemium. You can see this approach executed in the light version of Apple apps. I can download a free app, but it's only going to be a portion of the full-scale version of the app. I can play one level of a game, but to get to all levels, to get all of the Angry Birds, I have to upgrade to the paid version. That's one line of thinking. The other says, if you teach people not to value your dream from the beginning, they never will. The logic is that if you start out with a price tag of $0, it's difficult to eventually charge money because when you tell someone your thing costs $0, they interpret it as worth $0. It becomes difficult for a fan to suddenly see monetary value in something initially valued at nothing. I experienced this firsthand with Shazam, the app, not the Shaquille O'Neal movie. That was actually titled Kazam. I can see how you might confuse the two. The Shazam app allows you to hold your iPhone up to any song playing anywhere and instantly get the name of it. When it first came out, Shazam would give you an unlimited number of song captures. I used to capture the title of about 40 songs a month. It was free and I loved it. Then one day, I tried to use the app and got a message that said I had used my allotted tags for the month. Unbeknownst to me, Shazam had reduced their infinite tags per month to 5. That's a significant decrease. In order to make money, Shazam created a freemium version called Shazam Encore that costs $5.99. That's not a ton of money, and I completely get that Shazam is a for-profit company that has bills to pay. Or it's an individual programmer who would like to trick out a loft like Tom Hanks in Big. But I never used the app again. I had a hard time mentally making the jump from everything is free to $5.99. Your unique dream will likely require a creative approach to how you initially profit from it. But if you're going to hustle and you want to maximize the return, there will likely be at least some degree of freeness that comes up, because the nature of transactional relationships has changed. 3 things I learned about giving away stuff for free in the last 3 years. Number 1, people won't pay for what they can get for free. One of the misconceptions about my first book is that it's just a printed version of the blog. It's not. I personally would never pay for a book version of something I already had access to online. That would be a really lazy, boring way to create a book. Stuff Christians Like has more than 70 new essays that have never been on the site and never will be. That's not to say that I didn't use some of the greatest hits from the site. I did. I thought of it like a concert. If you went to see U2 and they said, "Tonight we're going to sing all new songs from an album you've never heard yet," you'd be disappointed. Even though you might love some of their new stuff, you want to sing along to One and Where the Streets Have No Name and a dozen of their other hits. That's how I looked at popular posts from my blog. People who liked the blog and picked up the book wanted to be able to flip to a page and show their friends the Metrosexual Worship Leader scorecard. That was a greatest hit. I revised and updated it, and I included it in the book because it was a favorite. I looked at the book as a continuation of the conversation I started for free on my blog. And even though I gave away a ton of free content online, I was still able to sell more than 40,000 copies of the book because it was not simply a photocopy of the blog. I have a hard time believing people will pay for the exact same thing they can get for free. You have to change it, add to it, improve, and in some way differentiate it if you're going to charge for it. Number 2, you have to weigh the long-term benefits of doing something for free. Getting invited to speak at the Dave Ramsey headquarters for the first time was really exciting. I had barely spoken professionally before, and suddenly it felt like part of my dream was starting to gain momentum. But as someone who was new to that arena, I didn't know if I should charge them for my visit. They hadn't mentioned an honorarium in their email to me, and I started to worry about what I should do. Is it better to charge Dave Ramsey for my speaking gig or not charge him? On the one hand, he's a financial guru and always talking about the need to take control of your money. Would he see me asking for money to cover my gas to Nashville from Atlanta as me being diligent with my budget? Or would they be insulted and say, "Never mind, we'll find someone else"? I can stay with my brother when I'm there, so my expenses will be minimal, but it will definitely cost me a vacation day from work. I went around and around in circles before ultimately deciding not to charge them. The experience was awesome, and they graciously gave me a massive bag of books as a thank you. Then a year later, I spoke again for free. Then a year later, I spoke again for free. But this time, they bought a copy of my book for every staff member. That was a big deal. And it was after that third time that Dave offered me my dream job. But what would have happened if, in 2008, as a no-name blogger without a book deal or any sort of real platform, I had fought for a $300 speaking honorarium? What if instead of hustling and coming up for free, I had pushed and scraped to squeeze an extra few $100s out of the situation? Those are great questions, and I don't even have to give you a hypothetical answer. Here's what my team leader said would have happened. We would have said, "No thanks. We appreciate you responding to our request. Sorry that we couldn't make this one work out. We wish you the best on your future endeavors." The relationship would have ended before it even really began. For $300, I would have put a stake in the heart of what would eventually become my dream job. That's a really expensive $300. At the time of the decision on whether to charge, I didn't know I would work there as a full-time author and speaker 2 years later. I didn't have the vision to say, "I'll pass on this $300 so that I can have my dream job later." If life were that clear, we'd never make bad decisions. But as you face free versus charged decisions, do your best to weigh out the true cost of the money you might make. Is there a big potential long-term gain that could be ruined by your short-term gain? Is this a situation where you are undervaluing your dream and need to charge? Or is it a chance to do something for free that might turn into something much bigger? Number 3, free pays dividends toward expertise. When we think about giving our dream away, we often worry about what we'll lose, namely money. If you do something for free, you do not get money. I'm a pretty awesome economist. But we sometimes lose sight of what we gain when we give our dream away. Practice, exposure, audience, and eventually, expertise. When I thought about charging Dave Ramsey for my second professional speaking gig ever, I didn't have any of those things. I'd only spoken once before, so I needed the practice. I'd never spoken anywhere with name brand recognition, so I needed the exposure of saying, I'm speaking at the Dave Ramsey headquarters. And I'd never spoken to an audience that regularly communicated with a fan base of 4.5 million radio listeners. So I needed the audience of 300 influencers. My need for expertise greatly outweighed my need for $300. Even though I couldn't foresee that 2 years later I would gain my dream job from this same speaking opportunity, I could see that the gain in experience was worth more than the gain in finances. And because I still had a day job, I could afford not to charge for that gig. The Dons weren't going to get me because I didn't quit my job the wrong way. My bills were covered. That's not to say I didn't charge for speaking at the time. I got paid by a conference for the very first time I spoke professionally. They offered me an honorarium, and I gladly accepted it. I want you to charge for your dream, and I love the stuff folks like Ben Arment with Dreamier do to help people figure out sustainable revenue models. But I want to make sure that when you wrestle with free, you don't overfocus on the money you'll lose. Jerry Seinfeld, the centerpiece of the most successful sitcom of all time, understands that principle. In an interview called Jerry Seinfeld on Comedy, he discusses a time he was working on his dream job of being a comedian. He did 2 shows a night for 18 months straight without missing a night. That's over 1,000 shows. Can you imagine how much money he made? The answer is none. Seinfeld says, we weren't being paid. We had to work, to learn, to get good enough to get work. One of the greatest comedians of all time had to give away his funny for free so he could gain enough experience to get paid for his dream job. Chances are, you will too. Although I've been speaking professionally for 3 years, I will still do some gigs for free in support of this book. I'll prepare a speech for weeks, fly from Nashville to San Diego, do the absolute best job I can, and get paid $0. Why? The success of this book matters more to me than the money I could make on the gig. I need the practice. I need the exposure. The book needs the audience. I'm not an expert yet, and free pays me dividends toward that goal. Just to jump off the script for a second, please don't interpret you not getting paid as you not deserving to get paid. That's one of the biggest traps, is that we have such a hard time seeing our dream as worth enough to get paid for it. So let me just say right now, you're worth it. You're worth charging for your dream. The thing you do, the thing that's unique to you, the thing you're pursuing, you can charge money for that. You're worth it. Don't confuse going for free with not being worth that. Don't confuse that as a talent issue. It's not a talent issue. It's not an ability issue. If you go with free, make sure it's a decision and you see benefit to that, not out of being insecure or feeling like your dream isn't worth somebody paying money for it. The beauties and dangers of competition. Speaking of Seinfeld, last Thanksgiving, my family held a Festivus Feats of Strength contest. We didn't intend to. We only planned to run a 5K turkey trot that morning. Nobody threw down the gauntlet of competition in the weeks leading up to the holiday. It was simply our year to get together as a whole family at a beach house. We expected nothing more than some quality family time. Relaxing, beach-style downtime. Instead, we ended up in the midst of an elaborate, multi-event bloodfest that spanned all 3 days. It started with the turkey trot, which my youngest brother, Bennett, won. Then as soon as there was some blood in the water, we all started to find new ways to compete. We held a 100-yard dash on the beach contest. We held a frisbee distance throwing contest. We held a heated game of billiards. And finally, we held a jump off the dock in November and swim back to shore contest. Almost everything we did turned into a competition, save for our family game of cards. We disqualified that game because my dad likes to teach us new card games and then slowly roll out rules at his leisure. In the middle of the game, as you get what you have been told is a winning hand, he will blurt out, "Oh, I forgot a rule. 7s actually equal 4 in this game. My bad. Forgot to mention that." Convenient. I'm very competitive, so when it came time to chase my dream, that sort of competition was in the back of my mind. It will probably be in yours too, since it's so easy to see who your competition is now. 30 years ago, if you wanted to be a freelance graphic designer, you couldn't easily find the other 30 graphic designers in your niche. There were conferences and organizations, but without the internet, it was difficult to discover where you stood. Now, there are a million ways to do that. In 3 seconds, you can do a specific Google search and pull up all the websites of those who you feel might be competing against you. You can read niche periodicals online. You can join forums and see who everyone refers to as the gold standard. You can see how many Twitter followers your competition has. You can check out their blog to see how often they update it, what new clients they secured, how strong their portfolio is, and how many comments they get every day on a new post. In an afternoon, you can get a virtual wheelbarrow of intel on your competition. That can be a great thing or a horrible thing depending on how you use it. In my own experience with how competition can impact a dream, I've learned one critical thing. Competition is a great motivator, but a horrible measurement. I like to look at what other authors do on their blogs. Often, they've thought of things I would have never imagined doing. I can find new ideas or approaches or a million other things that spark my creativity. Last Christmas, for instance, I looked at TonyMorganLive.com and saw that he did 10 days of his top 10 posts from the year. He used the content to take a 10-day break during the holidays instead of having to write new posts each day. I was initially planning to just do one post with 10 links to my 10 best posts. Instead, I tried Tony's method and was able to introduce 10 days of content that a lot of people would have missed if I did it all as a single post. There are times when looking at your competition will inspire you and encourage you. It's like going to a library of active projects. That's the beautiful potential of competition, motivation. But there is also a poison you have to be wary of, using competition as a form of measurement. Pitting your dream against someone else's is a fantastic way to get discouraged and depressed. Nothing good comes from measuring your dream against your competition. If you're beating them by whatever arbitrary form of measurement you're using, you run the risk of getting cocky and lazy. Feeling ahead, you'll take a nap and relax like the hare racing the tortoise. If you're getting beat by them, you'll start to feel like a failure and think that maybe you might as well quit. Measuring yourself against the competition is a lose-lose prospect. Even if you somehow manage to avoid either of those two paths, if you're the rare person who doesn't fall into one of those two results, measuring yourself against the competition is still fairly pointless. Comparing your unique dream against someone else's is like comparing apples and skateboards. The two will never measure up precisely. I have to remember this truth all the time when I try to compare myself to MichaelHyatt.com. Michael Hyatt is a friend who has a massive blog. It's also incredibly well designed. When I look at his site and compare it to mine, I can instantly point out 6 ways I am failing, but he is succeeding. Number 1, he makes it easy to sign up for his RSS feed. Number 2, his speaking dates scroll at the top so that people can see them. Number 3, he has graphics in his posts. Number 4, his YouTube channel is easy to find. Number 5, he's speaking at a lot of publishing events, and I'm not. Number 6, he interviews really interesting authors via video. His blog is better than mine in so many ways it makes my head spin. But here's the thing. He's the CEO of a major publishing company. He's a grandfather in his mid-50s who has spent decades successfully leading businesses. He's an expert in the publishing field. Is that the goal of my dream? To work in publishing? To become a CEO? To run a massive company? Not at all. I don't want to run a publishing company. I want to be published. There's a significant difference between my dream and his dream. But when I compare myself to him, I pretend there's not. I don't know who or what you will compare yourself to when you start to hustle, but I promise you will find competition. That is a temptation that even the best of us can't resist. But when you do, let the competition serve as a source of motivation, not a source of measurement. Then what should you measure? Measuring your dream against someone else's is toxic, but the idea of measuring progress is important. Without a way to measure what you're doing, you'll never really know how much your dream has grown as a result of all your hustle. To not take measurements or track your progress would be like